Welcome back to our Flip Learning series from the Illinois Flipped and Blended Learning Network. And what I want to talk about next is, now that we have the definition, now that we have the framework, what are some specific ways that the flipped classroom can look like in practice? There's two big camps here. There's more of a traditional flip, and then there's what's called an InFlip. All right? Now, in a traditional flip, we have the two spaces, independent space and group space. And we've talked about how those interact, how the independent space is things students can do on their own, usually outside of the classroom, and the group space, while it can be outside the classroom via digital means, is mostly happening inside the class. That's a very traditional flip. Individual space at home or outside the class, group activity inside the class. That's traditional. Now let's talk about the InFlip. The InFlip, it all happens in the same spot. Now, let's think about this a second. If one of the reasons we flip is to take things out of the classroom bucket so that we have space to make more activities for group activity in the same amount of space, how can we put it all back in and still fit more in? That's the InFlip. Well, first of all, you don't fit as much stuff in the InFlip as you put in a traditional flip. But again, it's not quantity that we're going for anyway. It's quality. It's also a matter of timing. In an InFlip, the students come in and they do the individual space components somewhere in the classroom. And then they also have the group interaction space somewhere within the classroom. The place where you gain time, the place where you can make more efficient use of that classroom space is that, unlike the traditional space in the classroom where the teacher is driving the pace, the InFlip is still a student-driven pace. Now, that student-driven pace is because I still have all of those individualized activities available and accessible in my framework. And the students simply do them in the class. Remember, in our framework for flipping, access was a big key. If you're in a situation where access may be a challenge for your students, the InFlip might be the solution that you need, because that access can be provided within that school environment more consistently and uniformly than potentially otherwise. So if that framework is available to students in the classroom, here's what it might look like. Students come into the classroom, but instead of waiting for the teacher to take attendance and get going, the student sits down, they get their digital device, which may be a classroom set. It may be their own device that they brought, BYOD. It may be their one-on-one Chromebook device or iPad device. It may be one device that a couple students share at a center, but they go and get involved in an individualized activity, either at the teacher's direction or of their choosing, depending on how well the training has gone on the method, also depending on what the teacher's trying to accomplish during that portion of the class. But they go to do that individualized activity. As the other students come in, they do likewise. Or if they're already done with that particular individualized activity, then they go join part of another group activity. And the job of the teacher is to greet all the students and direct who's going where and who needs what based on the data at hand. So that is how an InFlip starts its day. Now, as this student finishes an individualized activity, they may move to a different individualized activity. Or as this one student finishes his individualized activity, maybe he goes over here to a group activity. And so groups intermix and mesh repeatedly and remix. This is the type of differentiation that you can't have within a traditional classroom easily. Elementary teachers have been doing this for years. They call it centers, okay? All we're doing is we're applying those centers with a digital element. And in this case, an InFlip also does tend to work well at the younger grades or students with challenges, because now the teacher is right there to deal with any roadblocks or any frustrations immediately before the attention is lost or before frustration sets in. So that's a really good place for this idea of an InFlip. The other thing that we may do is on any given day, maybe they all come in and there is a together whole class group activity, whether it might be some direct instruction on something that all students are needing because it's something that as a professional educator, I know this is a struggle for the bulk of these students. And maybe it is some direct instruction, or maybe it is a group activity. Maybe it is a activity where I separate them off into two separate group activities. But at some point they may come around as they finish a group activity that individual space is waiting for them to do. The best way I found to make an individual space for a student is not curtains and it's not walls. It's nothing but a set of headphones. Students can put on a set of headphones, and as everybody knows that's watched their student or their children walk around with a cell phone and headphones in, they enter their own little world. And we can use that in a classroom to create individualized space in the safety of our classroom, in the learning educational safety of our classroom. And so they can be in an individual space or a group space without ever leaving the room. So we have the more traditional flip and we have the InFlip. It may be something that works for you. For me, I tend to use the InFlip in my general math with my students with the greatest needs, because I know they're not going to either do for motivational reasons or can't do for other societal reasons those things that I would otherwise send home with some of my students. They're not going to get done outside, so I'm going to move them inside. And some of the people might question that and say, well, aren't you letting them off the hook? The reality is, after 18 years of teaching, I know some of those students were never going to do it outside. So at minimum, even if I don't get as much as I might, they're at least getting this much inside the classroom, and I know it. And so in this case, they're getting more education than they would have otherwise if left to the old traditional system. So in the InFlip, in my case, it's because I want a better rate of return on the learning. That's why I happen to use it. For others, they use it for a variety of other reasons. The InFlip also works out very, very well in a mastery setting because that frees up the teacher to be working on mastery and on reteaching with students that need it, while other students can move on ahead and rush ahead. So all of those things are great benefits of the flipped classroom, whether you do it traditionally or in an InFlip situation.